All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Matthew Fava. I'm the Director of Ontario Region at the Canadian Music Centre. It's a real joy to be in the interwebs with you this evening for a really special discussion with Xuan Ye as part of the Music Gallery at Home series. Before we embark on that discussion, I'd like to begin by acknowledging that this land on which the Music Gallery operates alongside the Canadian Music Centre and other partner organizations, it has been the site of a human activity for 15,000 years. This land is the territory of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Anishinaabeg Nation, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. The territory is the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and Confederacy of the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Today, the meeting place of Toronto is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island and around the world. As part of this community and as individuals, it is up to us to recognize our privileges in this space and to educate ourselves further along the way, particularly in this time of conflict over Wet'suwet'en territory, where so many settlers have failed to understand what's truly at stake. I would like to continue by thanking the Music Gallery. Just from my vantage point, you can't do everything by yourself, particularly when we find ourselves in a situation like this, in isolation, away from many of the teams and resources that we depend on. So it's truly satisfying that we continue to find ways to partner with the Music Gallery and to achieve something greater together. And on that note, since I rarely have opportunities to address the public like this, I do want to offer congratulations to David Dax for his stewardship of the artistic mission of the Music Gallery. I've had the pleasure of sitting in the audience for so many extraordinary events over this past decade. It's really wonderful to have had the opportunity to work with him as well. And this is hardly the conclusion we might have imagined for his final season as artistic director. But again, it is really quite lovely to be able to adapt and dream up new programming opportunities alongside David. So during a printmaking session that I had with my daughter yesterday, we made a first edition print of panda corns. So David, at a point in the future when you're okay getting little bits of mail sent to you, we'll be sending this to you. And it says, "Job well done." So way to go, David. I'm glad that that we had this opportunity to work together again. And I know you're not able to join us live this evening, but I know you've been a part of this in so many ways, so thank you. But to the main event at this point, it is quite an honor to be speaking with artist Xuan Ye, and I'm not seeing the video feed, so I'm not sure if Xuan is over here or over here, but somewhere on either side of me is Xuan Ye, and I'm just going to offer a little bit of an introduction before I invite Xuan into the discussion. Xuan Ye makes media poetry, synthesizing language, code, sound, body, image, data, light, and time through processes of diagrammatic and multimedial translations. Xuan researches and couples with non-human agencies to experiment with world building and system modeling that reimagine the alien and permeable nature of self and subjectivity. Manifested as noise and signal in tandem, Xuan's mixed media work involves but is not limited to time-based and interactive installations, generative writing, projection mapping, software development, computer vision, and cross-reality. So the CMC commissioned Xuan as part of the Music Gallery at Home series to produce a work. It is titled "Even a Blind Squirrel Finds a Nut Once in a While," which will be interpreted by the various artists performing in the series. Last week, that was Jermaine Liu. Many of you may have seen that. This week on Friday, Naomi McCarroll Butler, and others to follow. So we have this great opportunity to learn more about the piece and to appreciate how it figures within Xuan's artistic work. So Xuan, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing this evening?
Thank you, Matthew. I'm doing great.
That's great.
Yeah, just like every day that's been in the past month.
But I also know from our pre-interview chat that you've gotten through some grant writing hurdles today, which I know continues to be a reality for every artist, even though there are a lot of uncertainties. But I'm glad that you're still building towards new projects, new possibilities with that.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
No problem.
And, just hope, finger crossed, I won't miss this deadline again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I'm wondering, just to get us started, if you'd like to share some of the ways that you're coping with the everyday right now, some of the things that are sustaining you, whether it's creative projects or other routines you've developed for yourself?
Yeah, I guess at the very beginning, I was secretly enjoy this social distancing because I'm a person who has been already very distancing from
Mm,
um, everyone, but I guess I do a lot of cooking.
mhm,
Like I guess I convert a lot of creative energy back to the daily mundane
mhm.
chores, and try to find joy out of that.
That's wonderful. Well, I'm happy that we get to chat about some of the artistic energies as they've been deployed through music and other mediums. The biography that you provide and any of the work that people may have encountered is really quite enticing. So, before we talk about the piece, which I guess can we use the shorthand of squirrels for this discussion? Is it okay if we call it squirrel? Okay.
One hundred
Before
percent.
before we talk about squirrels, I want to look at a recent period of musical activity for you, and I'm drawn to your November 2019 release, She She. So the album features a mix of improvised works. Some of them have these really stunning layering of vocal samples. Others have a really stirring orchestration of computer or electronically generated sound. And so I just wanted to comment that I really admire the instincts you display on this collection of works when you balance these lighter pulsing loops against swarms and bursts of abrasive sound. But there is always this clarity for the listener, which I find quite engaging. So I'm encouraging folks at home to check out your Bandcamp page, check out She She. But can you tell us about the creation of this album and your motivations to bring these pieces together in one collection?
Sure. This album, um, actually half of the album, the B side, it's it's a live set,
Mm-hmm.
a recording of a live set from 2016. It was part of the Nine Comfort concert series at Handlebar.
Aaron Dawson series.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. Yeah, and I've been really fond of that set. It was purely improvised and followed this rule or this instruction I give to myself in the past few years
Mm,
for live performance, which is never repeat the setup.
okay.
And then the A side is more, they're all home recordings. And yeah, I was hoping this LP will be sort of an ending of this kind of improvising practice I've been doing for years. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why there's this A side where in which I try to, draw inspirations or connections from what I really like in music making. For example, using voice,
Mm-hmm.
for example, field recording, and of course there's this very short solo piece on Fondero. Um, yeah, and um, I was imagining this A side to be a new beginning of a new exploration.
Well, that's interesting to hear. I know in an interview I watched that you gave last year, you made this really interesting remark, and I think you offered it somewhat jokingly that you, after completing Shishi, you plan to start making proper music. Again, you offered that somewhat jokingly, but meaning that you wanted to have more discernible melodies, rhythms as a basis for the music that you're making. So, can you give us an update on that? Whether you've reached that point, whether your music making now is progressing the way that you intended, whether that album did prophesize the kind of music that you're wanting to make?
Um, as a matter of fact, I haven't found
Hmm.
a new way of making music. The past 2 years, I have been diverging most of my energy to my visual art practice. And at the same time, just take a break and then really reflect and then think about what music truly means to me.
Hmm.
And I have to say, I have not yet found it.
Okay.
But yeah, of course, I play music almost every day, just here and there, and try to especially find a voice in my voice. Actually,
Hmm.
I've been practicing singing a lot. Um, yeah.
Interesting. Well, maybe in relation to this examining, because perhaps we can clarify that you're imagining music that is kind of self-contained within your performance. Is that also kind of the focus right now, that you're thinking about the music you can make as an individual creator? Okay. Because one of the other questions I had was thinking about your musicianship in relation to other artists that you've worked with, and so I feel lucky I've gotten the chance to watch or even just listen to archival recordings of you performing with Jason Dole, whose name appears on your T-shirt hilariously this evening, but also with Bridget Bardot, with Colin Fisher. So I'm interested to hear about the significance of these and other relationships, but maybe I gave myself one other prop. I'm wondering if you can. I lost one thing there. I'm wondering if you can, to respond to this question, respond to this object that I have.
Oh, wow. Yes,
So if you
yes.
can, because again, I'm interested in the kinship and what you gain or what you
Mhm.
feel you contribute when you find these really fruitful relationships with other musicians. And maybe you can talk about Darcy, who you got to play with for the first time in the fall in Toronto and Guelph, but perhaps others. But yeah, can you let us know what you find in those musical relationships that sustain that creativity for you?
Mhm. I guess all the examples you've been mentioning, like it's it depends on the person. With Jason Doll, um, who is my partner, so I guess a lot of the creative energy are between us are kind of spread out during daily life, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a very magical connection, as in it vacillates between something super mundane, super boring, um, and something super hyper spiritual,
Mm-hmm.
which is very special. Um, and with Bridget Bardot, Crystal, um, yeah, it's we're really good friends. We
Mm-hmm.
call ourselves quadruple Pisces twins. Just that reflects how special this
Mm-hmm.
friendship is. And every time I think about Crystal, it really lifts my spirits.
Mm-hmm.
She's just so amazing and always hustles, you know, through life. Which is, yeah, she's such a fun.
Mm-hmm.
So when I collaborate with her, uh, like we both channel this emotional energy through sound making, through noise making. Yeah. And with calling, it was really interesting. We played twice, sort of in public, sort of as practice.
Mm.
I have to say, at first, I was kind of intimidated playing with Colin because he's such a good musician, like
Yeah.
very, very fluent in his, very skillful. And I'm kind of my approach to improvisation is I I try to not practice at all.
Mm.
And so that a lot of times when I play live, these leakage of, you know, unskillful or like unlearned
Mm.
mistakes will happen.
Yeah.
And yeah. And, you know, like Colin is a person, when I think about him, the image in my mind is music. Yeah. With Darcy, which is another super special collaboration, we met each other at the farewell concert at Ratio.
Okay.
And just after the concert, I was like, "Would you like to collaborate?" And then he left back, went back home, and then we just the entire collaboration has been just going online.
Yeah.
But when I saw his live, and I immediately find the common interest and the mutual like the connection between us, which is this fascination about the oral.
Yeah.
And that collaboration actually lasted for over 3 years, and then we finally got our these recordings released with notice.
Yeah. Well, it's a really amazing recording. And I remember
Thank you.
I got this from Darcy when he was in town in the fall. And I kind of had an inkling of the compatibility between your two approaches, but it's really, really quite magical, as you said, to cut between the vocalizations that you have and your use of breath, and how much of Darcy's performance is driven by this physical heaving, this physicality, and this breath that he emits in his performance along with the jaw harp. So it's a real treat. And I do encourage people to check out Breath Fractals if you get the chance, as well as She. So we should at this point start talking about squirrels, and squirrels in the context of the Music Gallery at Home series. So when David, Dax, and I first reached out to you, we had this idea to generate postcard pieces. So small fragments of musical materials, and then we would distribute them for performances during the series. But you quickly had the idea to revisit and revise a work. Even a blind squirrel finds a nut once in a while. So we're going to talk about this piece, this score app, and I'm going to ask Crystal, if you can, at your leisure, bring up for the viewers at home a feed of this clip of what the app looks like, what the artist is confronted with and starts to interact with. So again, this is a web-based app. It displays an assortment of GIFs. They're tiled at different sizes, drifting across the screen at variable speeds. Now, there is a written introduction, but once the app is initiated, we don't get conventional musical directions or notation. However, in that commentary on the piece, you address a time-based concept of pulse, and you also reference variations, a term that is present and rooted in compositional practice and others. But can you share with us some information about your crafting this piece, and perhaps, as an improviser, how you imagine the dynamic between the app and the artist interpreting the piece?
Hmm. Um, yeah, when I was first approached by David, I immediately thought about this work. It
Mhm.
was originally a video score
Mhm.
that Michael Ling had interpreted, um, and at the time it was actually created for the theme, which is equality. I kind of approach equality from um, the perspective of communication, how or translation,
Mm.
how you know the communication between each individual or even between species can never be completely accurately mapped.
Mm.
And yeah, by saying that, I think my position is like equality. I think equality is a utopian idea. And then I immediately thought about like transforming that into something more generative.
Mm.
Um, um, and then when I started to transforming that into a web page, when coding the web page, I realized that you know, in order to have some kind of create this illusion of time
Mm.
in this 2D plane, I, as a creator or yeah, the app developer, I have there are a lot of limitations, and that leads me to think about how you know the nature of GIFs, because we extract these moments
Mm.
and contain them in these loops, and sort of like how we're situated right now.
Yeah.
We're all contained in the household, but at the same time, the sense of time, the chronoception
Mm.
um, has been also altered in a way that like I'm sure a lot of people have been feeling this way, and feeling like we're just living in a loop.
Mm.
So all of that lead to this how I feel about the limitations.
Mhm.
And then back to the score, the composition, I translate the time base into the visual composition. If one take a deeper look, like closer look at the video, it has two playing. I deliberately had two dimensions
Mm.
going on. One it's going left and right. One it's sporadically yeah, appearing.
Mm.
And to me, it's not a deliberate comment, but naturally it's just critiquing the nature of you know a score.
Yeah. And I think it's really effective. We're going to dig in a little bit deeper. But one thing I want to pause because for all of my efforts to give myself a script and keep myself on point, I forgot to mention one thing a little bit earlier. So if you're all right with me stepping outside of the flow of the discussion, to say for anyone watching at home, we're going to do a little bit of a giveaway so that if you are interested to hear more of Shun's work, add a chat, add a comment in the chat feature on the Facebook live stream. We're going to be drawing a name randomly from those who comment, and we're going to be sending you a copy of the LP for Xi. The only condition, you need to be based in Canada. But again, this is some amazing music from an amazing artist. So if you'd like to win a copy of Xi, an LP copy, add a comment in the chat feature on the live stream, and we'll loop back to select a winner and share that on the Facebook post later. So thank you for indulging that bit of a tangent at this point. But returning to the Score app.
Sorry, since you just brought
oh yeah, no problem.
let's I stirred up the rule. I want to shout out to David, aka Halo Klein Trans, aka Egyptics, aka Act, who has helped me dramatically throughout the entire release. Like, even though it's a self-released album, but he helped out so much with all the logistics and put up the shows and promotions and everything. So amazing. Thank you, David.
Thank you, David. We have various Davids we're thanking today, but yeah, definitely another excellent David. So we're going to dive back into the discussion of the Score app, as we've been giving it the shorthand tonight. We're going to talk about the Squirrels. But it's worth noting that in the performances for the Music Gallery at Home series, apart from the viewers seeing the performer, they are also getting to see the Score app on the screen. So they get to see the display that the performer is responding to. And this gives you an opportunity to play across the boundaries, I'll put quotes around it, the boundaries of different artistic disciplines, and bridge the communities that you've engaged with historically in your, even though they've been relatively isolated, you've been engaging with them actively, the visual art community and the music community. So can you comment on this piece in relation to your inhabiting these often exclusive or separate artistic spaces?
Yes. I guess it's kind of like a circle. If we talk about it chronologically, I started my creative practice in music, and then later on, the more I learn about music or sound, the more I'm drawn to, the more behind the scene. So, for example, what is sound? As in, sound is vibration. Sound is frequency.
Do we need to pause for a moment? Is that someone who needs to get in?
Okay, yeah, let me check. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. But just another reminder for folks watching at home, while Xuan tends to some knock at the door, this is not planned in any way. But just a reminder again, if you're interested to win a copy of Xuan's LP, Xi, released in November 2019, add a comment to the Facebook stream. Oh, see, we stalled just long enough. I hope everything was okay at the door.
I'm back.
Xuan.
I'm
Excellent.
back. Yeah. Where are we?
So we were talking about, you were talking about the circle, starting your artistic practice, starting in music, getting interested in the behind the scenes, getting into installation or visual art. So you were kind of plotting this development in relation to the Score app.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And of course, it's a process of like, I've been developing this kind of worldview for a long time that leads to where I am now. And I guess another, like what I wrote in my biography, I kind of see these different elements as materials instead of different
Mm.
like completely separate medium.
Mm.
Because to me, what you see, what you hear, what you sense, they are all integrated and interconnected.
Yeah.
You know, especially when we talk about it in the realm of the digital, like, it's all just code, and
Yeah.
it's all just zero and ones.
Yeah.
And through that goes back to like how I'm able to integrate these medium. It's through that. And I guess another big factor which really result in the now is I became a web developer when I immigrated to Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And that decision, well, it's kind of complicated, but because I did my undergrad in information technology. But yeah, that decision of becoming a web developer was purely out of the need for survival.
Yeah.
And because of that, I have to, in daily life, what I'm exposed to most is the screen and the back end.
Yeah.
And that, you know, I got to think a lot through that practice.
Yeah. Amazing. And one of the comments you made early on in that explanation, it reminded me a little bit of a conversation I had with David Chiquetto, where he was getting really angry about the idea of sense ratios and the way that we sometimes construct in our thinking about sensing a dominant or a subordinate sense, that we can somehow increase our attentiveness to one sense over another. But I think it's really compelling to remind ourselves, as you point out, that there is an interplay all of the time. Even if we think we're working just in one medium, that medium is impacted by countless other phenomena that different audience members will be sensitive to. So, building on this last question, though, I didn't, in my introduction, go through the various organizations that have presented your work and been engaged in your work. But we can point out that as far as music presenting organizations, you've been presented by the Music Gallery in the past, but also by Every Seeker on the East Coast, Suoni per il Popolo in Quebec. But you also had an installation at the Art Gallery of Ontario last year. Trinity Square Video has been super supportive of your work, and so, as you've been leading us towards this conversation about your installation-based practice, this is something I'm interested to know more about. And I'll just quickly shout out, and for folks who are interested, Joy Xiang contributes a really wonderful review of an installation of yours in Canadian Art Magazine. It was very helpful for me in preparing for this discussion, but I encourage people to go to Canadian Art Magazine and read some of the most recent reviews, which include, let me actually see if I made a note, because I made a note of one of the pieces they had a still from you was called Garrulous Guts, which is a brilliant name, by the way, and for me connects in so many ways to all of the other pieces of yours I've listened to, the idea of bodies sounding. But let me just jump into some of the ideas that Joy brings up and maybe get you to comment on them, because right now, out of necessity, we have relinquished many of the ways that we are physically present and engaged with one another. And you were commenting earlier that this isolation routine is something that you're kind of comfortable with already. But for a number of us, a greater degree of our lived experiences, our relationships, the meaning we make, it's all mediated by a constellation of accounts, posts, platforms. And once again, we have iterations or versions of ourselves that coexist for different audiences. So given all of this, your pieces have an uncanny resonance with our present cultural experience. So I'm curious to know what fascinates you about this dynamic, identities, bodies, cultures that exist and evolve when humanity and technology are enmeshed. Can you just elaborate a bit on this thinking as it connects to some of your recent installation works?
Yeah, That's very interesting. And I guess, like I was mentioning, you know, a lot of decisions or a lot of roles we take in our life aren't really chosen by nature,
Mm,
like, you know, because of capitalism, we gotta make money to survive. And because of, how um, it's the how um, the tech economy has been
mm,
developed so like has been accelerated. um, you know um, it's funny that almost it's considered essential service
mm.
now. Like who knows, like 20 years ago or 10, even 10 years ago, that we will be put in a situation like right now.
Mhm.
I guess what I try to say is there are layers of parameters and factors that contribute to this plurality of um, roles or identities.
Mhm.
And if I were to choose, I'd rather just be focusing on one thing.
Yeah.
But apparently, I'm the opposite of that. And yeah, I guess my personal, just from a personal perspective, it's all because of, my life journey. Um, and yeah, and sorry, going back to the bigger picture.
Mm.
I think, this is a very, I guess, default condition of, well, I guess 10 years ago you will say postmodernness. But now, as online technology develops, things get distributed, you
Mhm.
know, very easily, and as these network of distributed consciousness grows, it seems to even carry or generate its own agency.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's something that's gradually going to be more and more out of control,
Mhm.
in my opinion.
Well, I'd like to maybe connect then our discussion of Even a Blind Squirrel to another of your pieces, another of your installation pieces. And I feel there's a bit of compatibility conceptually, and I'd love to get you to comment on this. So I also got to read a really lovely interview you did with another wonderful local arts organization, Interaccess, regarding Every Letter Cyborg and the permutation of this project that they presented. And I guess this was about a year and a half ago. So Every Letter Cyborg, it's drawing upon a particular source text and then visualizing various linguistic recombinations. So can you contrast the two pieces, Blind Squirrel and Every Letter Cyborg? One draws upon the database of words, that's Every Letter Cyborg. The other draws upon a database of GIFs, so a different unit of meaning. How do they mingle in your thinking? How do they connect to these ideas you're discussing and extrapolating from?
I think the most common thing between these two projects are how I use database, or I see
Mm,
database as material,
yeah.
and I find databases are very interesting material because they are, to me, they're found, and they're usually indexed, and they're always present themselves as the sum of uh, other like smaller single bodies, and um, yeah, and I've been really fond of the idea of uncreative writing.
Mm.
It's coined by Kenneth. Oh God, what's his last name? um, yes, yes. The idea is that in the information age, we it's just there are just oversaturated information,
Hmm.
and instead of creating new, um, and the idea of the original have long gone,
Hmm.
you know, like there's almost no way you can be truly original, because how, you know, how you receive information, and how those received information got perceived, and then in return make an impact in on your own intuition even.
Yeah.
So so that being said, it seems that there's no point to create, you know, hence the uncreative.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think my practice is really, really, you know, rooted in that concept. But back to using database as material, I guess my very first, well, self-acclaimed very first artwork is another project where I dated back to 2011. I created a database of all the photos I've taken,
Hmm.
and compile it into a website. And when you go to the website, it will only show one image out of this huge personal archive. And like you refreshes the page, it will show randomly pick one.
Okay.
To me, it's like kind of like how memory sometimes functions. And these are, you know, images or short writing excerpts or poems. They are extracted moments confined in this cut,
Yeah.
these cuts, and by just mixing them, well, I guess compiling them into an archive, it's building up a personal history. And however, by mixing them together and then, you know, randomized using computer randomness to just choose one, is like it's almost like disrupting the time
Mm.
of this personal history.
Interesting. Well, what I'd like to jump to now, while still maybe staying within your career or your work within installation art, you kind of commented earlier about this circular movement that you've been in, and I'd like to kind of complete a circle with a recent highlight in your career. You traveled back to China, and I believe this was the fall of 2018. This
Yes.
was for your piece Error. If I'm delivering that the correct way, it's ERROAR exclamation, uh, and it was commissioned by the Beijing Inside Out Art Museum. So I'm interested to know what this piece and the context of exhibiting in Beijing meant to you. But I'm actually a little bit more interested to hear about the opportunity you had to lead a workshop with some school age students while you were there. So, given your experience, going through music education, exploring art, or going through software development, exploring visual art and installation art. What did you want to share with these students at that point? You had gotten to a point in your career and artistic life. What was important to share with them when you were there in the class with them?
Mm-hmm. To answer the first question,
Sure. Yeah, go right ahead.
I actually went back to China in 2018 twice.
Okay.
There
Thank you for
were
clarifying that.
two trips. The first trip was I was in this group exhibition that's curated by my friend Wen Xing, and it was at the Goethe Institute in Beijing. And I was actually showing Every Letter Cyborg
Okay.
at that show, and then did a performance. And at the exhibition, I met the curator of Inside Out Art Museum. And then again, being invited back to create a new work that's that was commissioned to respond to the present reality, in terms of technology development. Yeah, it was actually really, I was really, really happy to go back for that kind of purpose. Because I started my art practice. I started my art practice in Canada. So back home, nobody knows I'm an artist. And yeah, I've been encountering conversations like, "Oh, I thought you make music," you know. Yeah, and by music, they actually probably meant, back to the time when I was a singer-songwriter, that kind of music. So I was really happy that I got to. It's almost like you're reborn. Yeah, the circleness is really interesting, and I was also really happy. To answer the second question, is that I got a chance to teach this workshop at this. It's a high school. It's a private high school, actually. That was just, the not a teaching experience, just the experience going back to a high school in China, completely just like, all these memories flashback. And I do notice that most of them are kind of sad. And just like how I observe these kids, the workshop is like this 2-hour extra curriculum thing to them, and they got to sign up when they don't have homework to do.
Okay.
Yeah, and so whoever were like ended up being in that classroom are kids who are like, I don't know what to do now, in my yeah, and I was able to lead this workshop about just a very brief introduction about generative art, and using to them we did this collage activity where they come up their own algorithm, their own rule to do the collage. And yeah, and some of the kids, I remember very clearly one of the kids, her collage, and because at the end everybody get to explain why they do that, and then she's like, I just feel really sad every day, and all the imageries she chose, or the text she chose, are like very heavy topics.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just, this. idea of yeah, and what I feel the most, which is so vivid, was this feeling of the residues of oppression,
Yeah.
in your body. How how it's so important to unlearn, and um, and it's something when you were young, and if you're just like a normal kid, you will never be able to, you know like be aware of that. You
Hmm.
need enlightenment from other sources, and most kids don't have that,
Yeah.
have the access.
Well, that is certainly a topic to explore more deeply, and I know we're running short on time. But I had another question that maybe connects with the heaviness of our present moment, but also the preamble to this very heavy moment. Um, so maybe I'll just say, for the sake of duration, the discussion I'm going to offer is going to have a few generalizations just to set up this question, because we've talked about bodies and how we can produce versions of ourselves in our art. Earlier this year, this was around the same time that many of us were processing information from the initial Chinese response to COVID-19. You were sick and you shared a comment online about taking the TTC while wearing a face mask. And the memory of that post, it stuck out as I was preparing for this interview. And I wonder if you can comment on that tension, which feels significant to me, between the proliferation of one's self or selves within artistic mediums relative to that near eradication or reduction of the self that can be imposed when we're in these public spaces, especially when perceptions of our bodies are filtered by race, gender. I'm wondering if you can tell us about that. I don't know if you want to. I don't want you to have to relive that moment exactly, but if you can talk about that tension a little bit, I'd be fascinated to hear your response.
Hmm. Hmm. I guess, you know being othered, it's it's a I guess a process, or um, a kind of experience that, you know when you don't follow, or you appear to be against the norm.
Mm.
So in what I'm trying to say is, like, it's something almost everybody would experience. And in the context of COVID, um, uh, yeah, I have to say I'm a little bit speechless right now,
Oh,
because
that's understandable.
there has been the anti-China sentiment has been very much embedded in, especially from American
Yeah,
propaganda, and um, which is super ignorant and stupid.
yeah,
Um, and I have to say, like, in my artwork, I know uh, I have this tendency to stay anonymous.
yeah.
And that is actually coming from my understanding, or my fascination about Zen Buddhism, and the idea of selfless.
Mm.
Um, but I do, I am aware that it could be problematic, in the sense that, in a multicultural society, these other parameters of your identity will be made use, or mediated
Mm.
um, against you. Maybe, you know, who knows, like, maybe that tendency is also out of this surviving as a surviving strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to sound heavy.
Oh, I know. I brought it up. I felt it was. I mean, it is part of the way that we can try and make sense of this complex moment. But I really appreciate the way that you confront these ideas and the way that you articulate them through your art, but also in your discussions of your artistic practice. So I really thank you for at least in your social media persona that I know a number of us access, that we get to see your perceptions of that and then draw the connections with your art making. But we're coming to the end of the interview, and I'm just wondering whether you want to maybe just drop some hints about other things you're doing. So we know that you're a part of this Music Gallery at Home series that will continue over the next few weeks. Your work is being featured. But what other activities have you lined up for yourself in the next few months in these unique circumstances?
Right. Thank you for the interview, actually.
No problem.
Yeah. In fact, on Saturday with Interaccess, there's an artist panel between me and it's about the exhibition Feeling of the Klein Bottle that was at Interaccess, but very unfortunately, the week after our opening, everything got shut down. So on Saturday, this panel will be a great opportunity for people to get to know this exhibition a little bit more. Me and the other artists, Wenxing, and the curator Belinda Kwan will be there. And still part of the same project. I'll be, because this exhibition is at 3 different sites.
Okay.
So the first stage was at Varley Art Gallery in Markham, and the second one is at Interaccess, and the third one is with Bunker 2 Contemporary Art Container. And because of the new normal, we are going to launch the Bunker 2 exhibition virtually in partnership with Trinity Square Video.
Oh, great. Awesome.
Yeah. So that's this project. It's basically all I'm focusing right now.
Well, just for the folks who are watching and who might be watching at a later point when we post the video, what is the best way for people to follow your work? Website, social media, what's the best way to stay in touch with your work?
I guess, well, unfortunately, social media. Instagram at a Pure Apparatus, and Facebook at same handler. Yeah, and for folks who are interested in the exhibition I just talked about, it's there's a website which compile all the conceptual frameworks and all the ideas. It's feelingthekleinbottle.com.
Awesome. We can drop that link into the chat feature on the live stream as well. But thank you again, Xuan, for this wonderful discussion.
Thank you, Matthew.
We have a few things to say in the outgoing part. So I don't know if Krista will kind of keep your head hovering, but if you can stick around for just a moment, just a few notes for our viewers at home. We need to plug the upcoming Music Works issue because Xuan is one of the artists profiled in that upcoming magazine issue. There is a piece written by Sarah Constant. So a great opportunity to, again, delve deeper into Xuan's work. Of course, we want to mention and encourage you to join us this Friday. This is going to be at 7 p.m. Eastern for the next installment of Music Gallery at Home featuring Naomi McCarroll Butler. Naomi will be performing Xuan's piece as well as others. For people who are, oh my goodness, right now I'm getting the indication that it's 8 p.m. Eastern. The Canadian New Music Network is hosting a panel for Earth Day, today being Earth Day. So you can hop over to the Canadian New Music Network Facebook page and start viewing. So just a little bit about that. They're asking the question, as we imagine life post-pandemic, what role do music and sound have to play in building a more sustainable world? The CNMN Earth Day conversation features 6 sound and music artists whose work moves us towards ecological connection. So please do indulge if you are staying online for another portion of this evening, and go to this Canadian New Music Network website, Facebook page, sorry. I want to send a special thanks to Crystal, who has been in the background making all of this happen and making all of this so easy for Xuan and I. So thank you so much, Crystal, but also thank you to David, Sergio, the MG staff for their tireless efforts. It is wonderful to be working with you. Thank you for supporting music making in Toronto. And lastly, Bandcamp is having another waiving of their share of sales on Friday, May 1st. So I mentioned that Xuan is an artist who has works posted and available for sale on Bandcamp, but other artists who are going to be featured in the series, like Slow Pitch Sound, others will have works available. So if you can go to Bandcamp, support artists, they're going to see more income from the sales on Friday, May 1st than they would any other day. So please make an effort to go there. And lastly, if you haven't yet done so, feel free to drop a comment in the chat for the Facebook live stream. We're going to be selecting a winner who will receive a copy, an LP copy of She, Xuan's album from November 2019. So all of that is concluded. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you again to Xuan. Thank you, Crystal, and have a good evening. We'll see you on Friday.